Let's give a warm and dry welcome to Michael Johns.
Thank you very much, Patriots of Norwich. Thanks a lot for coming out during a little bit of rain. You know, it kind of reminds me of the Washington's forces at Valley Forge, right? Endured a lot more. We can tolerate a little bit of drip drop here for a few minutes. I'm very proud to be here, really in two capacities. First and foremost, I am here as a fellow Tea Party member and fellow Tea Party activist. I spent a large part of my career in public policy and government, and much like all of you, have held in great suspicion people who spent their whole life in it. So I left that profession, and in the 90s, not necessarily thinking that I would ever again return to it, but in 2008, as we started to face the national choice, like many of you, I had a lot of skepticism about the man that currently inhabits the Oval Office and re-engaged in that process. And I certainly, in February and March of 2009, as this Tea Party movement started to galvanize on a national level, something within me, as I know probably within all of you, led me to believe that this was going to be a dynamic, unprecedented, and hugely important movement for this country and its salvation. And let me say this, absolutely. Let me say this, and I say this by way of praise of your work, but also by way of emphasizing the importance of your work. I believe that there's a lot of great organizations, there's a lot of great political candidates, there's a lot of, there's even maybe one party that we can make our peace with or more. But it is this Tea Party movement, more than anything else, that is the last best hope for the salvation of this nation and this state. Now, I support the Tea Party. One thing I support about Tea Party patriots and about the Tea Party movement is that I think they have a long-range vision for this country. And I think it's proper that many Tea Party organizations consciously make the decision not to get caught up in the minutia and the endorsements of candidates and all that entails. The skepticism of the electoral process is healthy, but of course all of you know that doesn't mean that we disengage from that process. And we are right now 9 days away from one of the most important primaries in the history of this state. We need your attention, we need your engagement, and I want to share with you a few ideas that I think are critical to keep in mind as we move forward. We're not just, asking, I know what's in the hearts and minds of all of you as Tea Party members. We're asking for you to exert the great leadership skills that you have. There's no secret, as you well know, this country is headed down the wrong path in nearly every way. This state has mirrored it. We have 9 days and only 3 outcomes in that race. One is more of the same, and maybe even at an accelerated pace. A second carries an R behind his name, but doesn't share your views and values for the future of this state. The third is a man I've really only come to know in Carl Paladino over the last few months, but I've been impressed because, while not a career politician, and while a guy who's made a few mistakes, and probably never thought he'd be sitting here today running for governor, he is the man who best shares the visions, values, and ideas of the Tea Party movement. And it's important to remember, as Tea Party movement has always emphasized, no man, no one person is the salvation to our nation. That's a totalitarian thought process, right? That's everything that's emblematic in what we've just rejected in Washington. That said, we need to make a choice. And I'm hoping that we will make that. I kind of worded it to Carl jokingly the other day. He was talking to the New York Times editorial board, and I said, just thinking out loud, if you think we need another lawyer in Albany, you got one there running in Cuomo, he's your guy, right? You think we need a bank lobbyist who's on a leave of absence, then, Rick Lazio is a good guy for you. If you want a guy who has created jobs and knows the economic climate that is necessary to bring this state back, then there's no doubt about what the choice should be for governor of this state. We need Carl Paladino in Albany. Let me walk through a few of Carl's principles because I think they're thoughtful and they're important. And I'm here today because there are primaries across this country on Tuesday the 14th. But I believe you cannot ignore the chief executive of the second most populous state in this country, and a state that matters so much to the future of this country. I believe on that day, this is one of the single greatest elections that will be happening in this country. And whether it's been said or not, let me say it here today. When you wake up on Wednesday, November 3rd, there's only going to be two storylines. The Tea Party movement won in New York State and pulled off a victory despite great odds and against an establishment, or the Tea Party movement was defeated. We don't want that latter message. We know that that's not the message that needs to resonate across this country for this Tea Party movement to prevail. We talked to you about a few of Carl's ideas because they're ideas I know all of you share. And I'll be brief about them, but I want you to really pay attention carefully because they are not shared. These are not ideas that are shared by the other two candidates. Carl Paladino realizes, as the Tea Party realizes and taxed enough already, that New York State is overtaxed. And he has endorsed a major cut of 10% across-the-board taxes in this state that he will implement the first 6 months in Albany. He is the only candidate to put forward a specific agenda for cutting the taxes of New York State. And as all of you know, while there are many reasons that we're in this colossal economic mess, there's perhaps none greater than the fact that Americans are overtaxed at all levels. Overtaxed with federal taxes, state taxes, sales taxes, property taxes, estate taxes, death taxes, and the list goes on and on. All right, we need tax relief in New York State. Carl Paladino supports that, and he will bring about an over 10% cut to New York taxes. He's promised, and this needs to be done, that he will review every department within the New York State government to assess whether those departments and the associated expenditures are or are not in the best interest of New York taxpayers. And let me tell you something that I know about Carl Paladino. He will not hesitate to bring down the axe on wasteful spending and end special interest politics that exist in Albany today. That's hugely important. Carl Paladino has, and I think this has been missing in the liberty movement, a very affectionate view toward the manufacturing base of this country and of this state. You know, one of the biggest misnomers is that somehow conservatives and liberty-minded Americans and this Tea Party movement have hostility to manufacturing. We've had issues with big labor, that's to be sure, big labor leadership. But from the standpoint of friends of the manufacturing sector, the manufacturing sector in this country has no greater friend than the Tea Party movement, and consistent with that, Carl Paladino has promised major tax cuts in the manufacturing sector because he knows, as a hugely successful businessman, that manufacturing companies in New York State can do business anywhere. They can cross the border to New Jersey, which is doing some good things right now. They can move into other areas. They can leave this country entirely. We want to keep manufacturing in this country. Carl knows we need to cut taxes on the manufacturing base, and that's important. I've worked in the healthcare industry for the past 10 or 15 years. Another thing Carl's promised to do is to take some major cuts to the inefficiencies, duplications of service, and outright corruption that exists in this state's Medicaid program. And that's hugely important. He's the only candidate to do that. And it's a brave stand and it's a proper stand, and this state doesn't correct its ways if we don't reverse the trend within state Medicaid.